The rise of China as she surges towards being the leading modern economy is in itself an example of the unimpeded march of power. As Napoleon said, "Beware of the sleeping dragon, for when she wakes, all the world will tremble." Her government and social control an example of the ordaining of a society for a national benefit. As Mao said, power comes from the barrel of a gun, and that mantra has never been forgotten by China's rulers. A very large, strong and well-resourced army commensurate with social control is unashamedly and primarily there to prevent social disorder and freedoms. The population is a weapon to engender national wealth and prestige. Promoting this, army leadership is permitted control and benefits of the business economy. Unlike the West, business banking corporations are ultimately controlled by the government, and financial strength is guaranteed by the fear that its money is not allowed to be traded. The markets have no control. This means that corporate financial direction is always at the behest of government, if required for national interests. Of course, these are all factors condemned by what is termed the free world. However, if one looks at China with her high population and diverse ethnic makeup, all of this is a pragmatic power solution, holding the nation together. Difference or dissent or religion will not be tolerated for long if there's the slightest chance of promoting challenge or disagreement with the government ethos of one China. This China is and will be the greatest power challenge to the world. Her financial strength, supported by cheap labour, combined with her need for world resources and food, will see her make her increasing demands from the world. She will buy what she can, and her financial power will reduce poor emerging nations to support her needs, either through corporate seduction or corruption. It'll be interesting to see how her power progression will be executed. Power dictates her long-term goals to be world domination, some of which she is successfully pursuing through the exercise of soft power business, aid, finance and political seduction. And here she is utilizing her most important and ancient character, the gift of patience. Power does not care how long it waits, but it already knows the outcome. It will always rule. At present she sits and waits, but she is not idle. Manipulation of world bodies to suit her intent, the continual subtle push against America, that will see that faltering giant expend her strength in useless wars, that will ultimately serve to drive her back to her own borders now that the nuclear threat is no longer viable. Meddling in the Middle East, Africa, North Korea, Taiwan and Asia will stretch American power and influence to breaking point and ultimate defeat. The destructive logic of nuclear confrontation will demand a new type of war and weaponry, and this is being rapidly provided by the computerization of our world. China has long recognized the vulnerability of satellites and demonstrated her ability to destroy them. At present, this is the biggest threat to Western power. All of this does not mean China herself is not vulnerable. Internal dissent fostered by increasing technical sophistication and education, necessities for our economy, will lead to greater demand for internal social control. These things have always engendered power abuse and corruption, which could bring down the internal system. There is some evidence of this occurring with the corruption of government, army, and police will act to control for some time. But these are all games of power, and power will win. The rise and possibly the fall of America can be traced in the way power has moved with the same ultimate design but in different milieu. This is a nation born in war and reared in the illusion of individual and personal freedom. One might think this would have produced an utopia, but instead has produced a society divided by every form of individual prejudice, with the rights of the individual enshrined in its constitution. While this may mean that Jack is as good as his master, the survival of the fittest syndrome enhances and promotes the present social and financial inequality within the civilized world. If one is poor, it is their own fault, which removes social responsibility from the rich and powerful. Not all, of course, but in a view that predominates and guides natural laws and social response. Survival of the fittest is enshrined in the national psyche. On this has been built the most powerful military machine that the world has ever seen. And the American economy is largely dependent on the production and sale of arms, both large and small, with little oversight as to the purchaser. However, the Soviet Union fell because it failed to underpin its military strength by financial power. America is approaching the same tipping point. The corruption of our financial system and the market created the GFC and demanded power take its natural course. This would have brought great hardship to the people, but would have consolidated power and resources to a much smaller elite, both inside and outside America, and it is here that the American establishment must walk a fine line. The Constitution gives its citizens the right to bear arms, and America is awash with guns, and because of her many wars, thousands have returned soldiers trained in their use. A financial collapse within America could engender war against the establishment. This danger is ever present. Although it is called the greatest democracy on earth, the fact its government is elected generally on a very low voting turnaround, having a large percentage of the population unattached and who actually hate the government, all of this mingled with high drug culture and sectors of religious fundamentalism, ethnic divisions, colour divisions, and a rabbit brainwashed nationalism leaves American society just as vulnerable to social upheaval as any of the unstable Middle East. A bird's eye view of human nature and survival of the fittest, even in what could be regarded as modern stable society. Power doesn't care because power needs war. When one looks at the present world situation, it is difficult to form an overreaching view to predict where the human race is headed. All that can be seen are the dark clouds of conflict, and an easy peace maintained by the threats of war logically cannot last. If peace is ever to be found, it must come from mutually agreed protocols, having its first aim complete disarmament. This could only happen if decision-making is removed from the army generals and power perspective and placed in the hands of the philosophers who show an understanding of the human psyche and its components, energy, matter, intelligence, and spirit. Only by understanding this can power be defeated and peace achieved. This at present is a highly unlikely outcome. It could perhaps be engendered by some worldwide calamity, but highly unlikely otherwise. The principal centres of power present are America, China, Russia, Europe, and the new dog on the block, Islamic terrorism. A quick look at their situation shows the American efforts at being the world policeman has bitten off more than she can chew. Her squandering of treasure, her internal problems and financial corruption denotes dark days ahead. In Europe, the Eurozone is collapsing, but this will rebirth an old Germany. Russia is on the rise again, but appears to be moving more towards dictatorship with strong criminal elements. But Islam, the new kid in the block, though stretching from Middle East to northern China, remains an enigma. This is not a nation per se, This is an example of what science ignored. As a high, diverse mass of people held together by a God, a prophet, and a religion. And because of centuries of oppression and exploitation, it is a culture of hatred of the West, Jews, Christians, and particularly America. And because this hatred is demanded by their God and religion, it is something that never can be defeated by missiles. Of course, for terrorism to flourish, two things are necessary. One is support of the people, either active or passive. The other is financial support. The various Islamic terror movements are being helped and facilitated by power elements within nations. Their aim is to drag down America and drive her back to her own borders. To find their principal supporters, one must look at who would benefit. This is how power works and gives direction for those Islamic movements in the drive to establish an Islamic nation from which to reach the world caliphate of Islam, as demanded by their God. I find it difficult to understand why science ruled out any consideration of taking account of religious and spiritual belief in their consideration of the elements making up humans, the world, and the cosmos. Given that science only tends to consider those elements that are provable, I still wonder why they miss spirit. 80% of the world believe in it and still do. It is invisible and eternal, but so is energy, and so is the recently discovered dark matter, which may be spirit. Those who may have considered the spiritual angle have been distracted by a concordant demand on them to believe in the existence of a God, and the God that has been established being so illogical and unbelievable that his rejection leads to the rejection of spirit and the spiritual. So now it is time for the what-if theory to come into play. It is time now for science to say, what if spirit exists as an element in the cosmos, in all life forms in the world and our DNA? As energy is the most powerful material force in the universe, spirit is a much more powerful immaterial force, binding everything together, invisible and eternal. It is present in everything in the universe and in all life forms. It is inextricably melded with the material, and this is why our human intelligence knows that it is in our bodies, even if matter is most dominant of our composition. We can access its power while dominated by materialism, and because our intelligent spirit, or soul as it's been called, needs nothing material to exist like food, riches or power, its influence is mostly confined to helping us to avoid the materialistic traps of greed and power. The reasons for this we will cover later.